She didn't just disappear, she staged her own death, and the truth will chill you to the bone. I'll never forget the first time I heard the name Stacy Feldman. It was whispered at a dinner party, nothing more than an aside between two colleagues who thought they were speaking in confidence. But in my line of work, whispers tend to stick. I'm not a cop, not a journalist bound by bylines or networks, I'm something else entirely. Let's just say I make it my business to know what people don't want others to find out. And Stacy's story, it was one of those tales that wrapped its cold fingers around you and didn't let go. On the outside, Stacy's life looked flawless. A suburban home that could have been plucked straight out of a real estate brochure, 2 kids who wore smiles like accessories, and a husband who projected the perfect image of stability. He was the kind of man who shook hands too firmly, laughed a little too loudly, and never missed an opportunity to remind others of how well he was doing. To neighbors and friends, they were the couple everyone envied. But envy is a dangerous emotion, it blinds people to the fractures forming just beneath the surface. The truth was, Stacy was bored. Not the kind of boredom you shake off with a vacation or a hobby, but the soul-deep kind that gnaws at you, day by day, until you start to feel like a ghost in your own home. She wasn't unhappy in the conventional sense. Her husband didn't hit her, didn't starve her, didn't humiliate her in public. No, his crime was subtler, indifference. He stopped seeing her, stopped noticing when she cut her hair or wore a new dress. To him, she was furniture, always there, always useful, but never really appreciated. That kind of neglect plants seeds. For Stacy, those seeds grew into something darker, something I can only describe as hunger. A hunger for attention, for danger, for something that made her feel alive again. That's when the idea of her own death entered the picture. Not in the tragic way you might imagine, not as an escape from despair, but as a performance. A staged death, an elaborate hoax designed to give her control, to give her story weight, and maybe, just maybe, to punish the man who had stopped looking at her. The first time she mentioned it to me, her voice was calm, almost casual, as though she were asking about the weather. What if I just disappeared? She said. What if I let everyone think I was gone? At first, I thought it was a joke. People fantasize about starting over all the time. But Stacy wasn't joking. There was a gleam in her eye, a determination that told me she had already been rehearsing the details in her head. You need to understand something about me. I don't scare easily, and I don't shock easily either. But hearing a woman, a mother, calmly propose staging her own death, it chilled me. And yet, there was something irresistible about her conviction. She wasn't asking for my permission. She was recruiting me. Her plan was simple in theory but complex in execution. She wanted her husband to believe she was dead, at least for long enough to watch him squirm, to see if he felt anything at all. It wasn't about money or insurance. It was about control, about reclaiming a sense of power that had been drained from her over the years. She wanted to watch him unravel, even if she had to do it from the shadows. I remember how she leaned across the table, her voice dropping into a whisper as though someone might overhear us. She already had ideas, how to leave a trail of digital breadcrumbs, how to plant evidence, how to time everything so her disappearance would look spontaneous but convincing. This wasn't a woman acting on impulse. This was a woman planning a production. Looking back, I can see how dangerous it was to even entertain her idea. But Stacy had a way of pulling people into her orbit. She was magnetic, unpredictable, and utterly convincing. That night, as I listened to her map out the first steps of her staged death, I realized 2 things. 1, she was absolutely serious. And 2, I was already too deep to walk away. I still don't know why she chose me. Maybe because she saw the same emptiness in me that she felt in herself. Or maybe because she knew I had the skills she needed, skills I don't talk about, not in public, not under my real name. What I do know is that the moment she spoke those words, "What if I just disappeared?" the trajectory of both our lives changed. When Stacy first laid out her idea, I thought it was madness. Not because it was impossible, I'd seen enough of life's shadows to know that staging a disappearance could be done, but because of what it would mean. Faking a death wasn't like faking an alibi or sneaking out for a midnight affair. This was permanent theater. Once you stepped onto that stage, there was no clean way back. But Stacy had already committed in her heart. You could see it in her eyes, in the way her voice hardened when she talked about her husband. She didn't want to leave him quietly, didn't want a divorce, didn't want to pack her bags and start a new life across the country. No, she wanted something theatrical. She wanted the spotlight, even if it was shrouded in darkness. I remember the first time she sketched it out for me. We were sitting in her car, parked on a side street far enough away from her neighborhood so nobody would notice. She leaned across the console and whispered like we were plotting treason. And in a way, we were. First things first, she said. I need him to believe I drowned. It has to look like an accident. Something he could never prevent, something tragic, random. She was specific, almost too specific. She'd done her research. She talked about statistics, about how many women in her age range drowned each year in so-called freak accidents. She even cited case studies where families had mourned for years without a body, without closure. That's when I realized, this wasn't just fantasy. This was obsession. Her plan involved an outdoor charity event she was helping organize. There'd be a crowd, distractions, and just enough chaos to give her the cover she needed. She wanted to leave the impression that she'd wandered away from the party and never returned. A missing shoe by the riverbank. A scarf tangled in the reeds. Props in a stage play of her own making. You realize this isn't a game, I told her. My voice was sharper than I intended. Once you go missing, you don't just walk back in a week later. You'll be hunted, investigated. People will tear your life apart. Her lips curled into the faintest smile. That's the point. Let them look. Let them search. Let him, she meant her husband, finally know what it feels like to lose something he thought he owned. That word, owned, stuck with me. Stacy wasn't just fighting indifference. She was rebelling against possession. She felt like property, like an accessory to her husband's life, and this was her way of breaking free. The more she spoke, the more I realized she didn't just want to vanish. She wanted to watch. That was the dangerous part. She wanted to be close enough to witness her own funeral, to hear her husband's voice crack when he spoke about her, to know whether his tears were real or just for show. And here's the thing, I should have walked away. I should have told her to get therapy, to drink a glass of wine and forget the whole insane idea. But I didn't, because I wanted to see it too. I wanted to see how far she'd go. We began meeting more often, always in secret. Coffee shops in neighborhoods where no one knew her. Parking lots just out of sight of cameras. And every time, her plan grew sharper. She was meticulous. She rehearsed what she'd leave behind, how she'd delete her digital footprint, even how she'd time her disappearance down to the minute. One night, as the clock pushed past midnight, she said something that made my skin crawl. You know what the difference between a tragedy and a story is? She asked. A story needs an audience. A tragedy doesn't care. She leaned in close then, her breath warm on my cheek. I want a story. That was Stacy Feldman in a single sentence. A woman so suffocated by invisibility that she would gamble everything to make her life, and death, mean something. By the time I drove home that night, I knew there was no turning back. The deeper Stacy pulled me into her orbit, the clearer it became, this wasn't just a plan. It was a rehearsal. Every word, every gesture, every prop she chose was calculated. If her marriage had been a prison, then staging her death was the key she had carved, carefully and quietly, out of the bars that held her. It started small. She began leaving things behind in odd places, as if testing how invisible she could become in her own home. A bracelet tucked beneath the couch cushions. A silk scarf, forgotten, at the gym. I asked her once why she did it, and she laughed softly. Practice, she said. I need to know what it feels like to be missing. But what unnerved me most wasn't the items she planted. It was the way she began narrating her own vanishing like a playwright. She'd close her eyes and walk me through the sequence. The charity event buzzing with chatter, the sudden excuse to slip away, the muddy bank by the river where she'd scatter her props, shoe, scarf, maybe even her phone. And then silence. A woman swallowed whole by the night. I remember one evening when she dragged me to a riverside trail under the cover of dusk. The air was damp, filled with the hum of insects. She stopped near a patch of reeds and pointed. This is where it will happen, she said. Her tone wasn't nervous, it was reverent, as if she were standing at the altar of her own rebirth. She slipped off one of her flats and tossed it onto the mud. The shoe landed sideways, leaving an impression in the soil. See that, she said. That looks real. That looks like someone left in a hurry. She crouched, adjusting the angle, perfecting even the illusion of panic. Watching her in that moment, I realized Stacy Feldman wasn't just staging a death. She was staging a performance for an audience of one, her husband. It wasn't enough for the world to think she was gone. She needed him to believe it, to feel it, but there were cracks in her performance too. Late at night, when the thrill dimmed, I caught glimpses of fear behind her eyes. She'd call me suddenly, her voice trembling, and ask questions she should have asked weeks earlier. What if they find me too soon? What if they don't believe it? What if he doesn't care? That last question lingered longer than the others. It was the one thing she couldn't control, the reaction. She could orchestrate every step of her vanishing act, but she couldn't script her husband's grief. Or his indifference. The truth, that was the gamble, and it made her reckless. Already in too deep. I wasn't just a confidant anymore. I was an accomplice. And the stage, it was already being set. One night, sitting in her dimly lit living room while her husband worked late, she leaned back into the sofa, wine glass in hand, and asked me a question that shook me more than her entire plan. "Would you cry for me?" she asked, her eyes locked on mine, daring me to lie. I didn't answer. Maybe because I didn't know, maybe because I was afraid of what my answer would mean. That silence told her enough. She smirked, took a sip, and whispered, "Then I'll make him cry." It was in that moment that I understood her hunger went beyond revenge. She wasn't satisfied with being missed. She wanted to be mourned. She wanted tears, guilt, sleepless nights, all the things she'd been denied during years of being overlooked. The rehearsals continued. She practiced wiping her digital footprint, practiced vanishing from her own routine. At the grocery store, she'd stand frozen in the aisle, studying strangers, imagining herself as one of them, nameless, faceless, free. She even timed how long it would take to walk from the event grounds to the riverbank without being noticed. Every detail was a brushstroke on the canvas of her staged death. And I, reluctantly, stupidly, kept watching, kept advising, kept being drawn in deeper. Because here's the truth no one likes to admit, watching someone rewrite their life like that is intoxicating. It was dangerous, yes, but it was also mesmerizing. She had turned her despair into an art form. And I couldn't look away. What I didn't realize then was how far she was willing to go. That her performance wouldn't stop at shoes in the mud and whispered rehearsals. Stacy wasn't just staging her death. She was staging her rebirth. And someone was bound to get crushed in the process. The night Stacy finally put her plan into motion, the air itself felt heavy. Not just humid, not just thick with the late summer heat, heavy, like it knew something irreversible was about to happen. I remember sitting in my car 2 blocks from the charity event, watching the glow of the lights shimmer against the trees, my chest tight with a feeling I couldn't name. Excitement, fear, guilt, maybe all three. Stacy arrived just after 7, dressed in a pale blue dress that floated around her like smoke. She looked radiant, almost angelic, which made what she was about to do all the more unsettling. I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't on any official guest list. But Stacy wanted me close, wanted someone who knew the script in case something went wrong. Inside the event, everything looked normal. Music played, people mingled, laughter carried across the open lawn. But beneath it all, Stacy's performance was ticking forward. Every smile she gave, every polite conversation, was camouflage. She excused herself around 9, slipping away toward the darker edges of the grounds. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever did. That was the irony of her life and the secret weapon of her plan. I followed at a distance, careful not to draw attention. She moved quickly, heels crunching against gravel, until the glow of the party faded behind us. The river was just beyond the trail. I knew this part well. It was where she'd rehearsed, where she'd shown me the perfect spot to scatter her props. When I reached the bank, she was already there. She crouched low, placing her shoe half submerged in the mud, her scarf caught loosely on the reeds. She even dropped her phone, screen cracked from a deliberate fall. Every piece of the scene screamed accident. A woman gone missing after a late-night walk by the water. Her breathing was quick, shallow. Not fear, not yet, adrenaline. She turned to me with eyes that glowed in the moonlight. "This is it," she whispered. "Once I walk away, I don't exist anymore. You don't have to do this," I said. It was weak, I'll admit it. I'd had dozens of chances to stop her before, but this was the first time the words actually left my mouth. She smiled, not with warmth, but with resolve. "I already have." And then she walked into the shadows, leaving behind the last fragments of Stacy Feldman the world would ever know. I lingered there longer than I should have, staring at the scene we'd built. It felt wrong, too clean, too deliberate. And yet I knew it would work. By morning, her husband would be frantic. Police would swarm the riverbank. Reporters would descend. And Stacy, she'd be watching it all unfold from the safety of her new life, wherever she planned to hide. But the moment I turned to leave, a chilling thought struck me. What if she didn't intend to just disappear? What if she intended to test more than her husband's grief? What if her staged death became something far darker than either of us had planned? That thought haunted me as I drove home, headlights cutting through the night. The roads were empty, but my mind wasn't. I kept replaying her last words, "I already have." The finality in her voice wasn't just about leaving her marriage. It was about leaving everything. By dawn, the story had already broken. Local woman missing after charity event. Her photo flashed across news outlets before the search even began. Helicopters buzzed over the river, volunteers combed the trails, neighbors whispered behind closed doors. And in the middle of it all, her husband stood at the center of the storm, eyes wide, voice trembling as he begged for information. I watched the footage from my phone, hidden away in my apartment, heart pounding with a mixture of relief and dread. Relief, because the plan had worked. Dread, because I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Stacy had crossed a line even I couldn't follow her across. You see, there's one thing I hadn't told you yet. The night before she vanished, as we sat in her living room, Stacy had leaned in and whispered something I'll never forget. "If I can fool him," she said, "I can fool anyone. Even you." And for the first time since meeting her, I realized the possibility I hadn't dared to consider. Maybe her staged death wasn't just about her husband. Maybe it was about everyone. Including me. The morning after Stacy's disappearance, the world shifted. It was as if the air in Denver had been sucked out, leaving behind a vacuum filled with whispers, questions, and flashing cameras. News vans parked in front of her house, their satellites stabbing the sky. Neighbors who barely spoke to each other were suddenly huddled on sidewalks, trading theories like currency. The official story was straightforward. Stacy Feldman, beloved mother and community volunteer, had gone missing after a charity event. Her shoe and scarf had been found near the river. The police suspected an accidental fall. Her husband, tearful in front of cameras, begged for answers. It was exactly the story Stacy had scripted. Almost too perfect. I should have felt satisfaction. After all, the plan had worked flawlessly. But instead, I felt a gnawing unease. Watching the news footage, I couldn't tell if her husband's grief was genuine or staged. His voice cracked in all the right places, his hands trembled as he clutched photographs of her, his eyes wet with tears that cameras devoured. Was it real, or was it performance? In a way, it didn't matter. Stacy wasn't there to see it. Or was she? That thought haunted me more than anything. I had no way of knowing where she went after that night. No way of confirming if she was alive, watching from the shadows, or if she'd taken things further than either of us imagined. Because here's the truth. I never saw Stacy again. Not once. At first, I convinced myself that was part of the plan. She'd disappear, stay quiet, build a new life somewhere far away. But as weeks stretched into months, the silence became unbearable. No messages. No secret calls. No whispered updates. Nothing. It was as if she had staged her death not just for her husband, but for me too. And that's when the doubts began. I replayed every conversation we had, searching for clues I might have missed. Her fascination with water, the way she lingered at the riverbank that final night, the way her eyes had shone, not with fear, but with something close to peace. What if the performance had consumed her? What if the line between staging her death and actually surrendering to it had blurred in those last moments? The police never found a body. For months, searches combed the river. Dogs, divers, drones, everything. And still, nothing. She became a ghost story in her own neighborhood. A face on missing posters that slowly faded in the sun until no one noticed them anymore. Her husband eventually stopped giving interviews. He stopped making pleas on television. Life moved on. People always assume grief is loud, dramatic, endless. But the truth is, it grows quiet. People stop asking questions. They stop bringing casseroles. They stop caring. And the missing, they remain missing. But not for me. For me, Stacy never left. She lingers in every shadow, in every whisper of a woman's laughter in a crowd, in every glance I catch of a stranger who looks just a little too much like her. Sometimes, late at night, I wake up convinced I'll see her standing in the corner of my room, watching me, smiling that secret smile she wore when she first told me her plan. I ask myself often, was I her accomplice, or her mark? Did she pull me into her scheme because she trusted me, or because she needed a witness? Someone to tell her story when she was gone. Maybe that's why I'm telling it now. Because whether Stacy Feldman is alive somewhere under a new name, or whether she sank into that river and let the current carry her away, the truth is this, she succeeded. She made herself unforgettable. Her staged death wasn't just about punishing her husband. It wasn't just about breaking free. It was about control. It was about writing her own ending in a world that had written her off. And me, I carry the weight of it. Every time I see her name mentioned in old articles, every time I hear someone wonder what really happened, I know the truth, or at least part of it. But here's the thing. The last time I saw her, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "If I can fool him, I can fool anyone. Even you." And maybe she did. Maybe Stacy Feldman never died. Maybe she's still out there, living under another name, watching her own ghost story unfold from afar. Or maybe the river claimed her, and I was just the final audience to her last performance. Either way, her story doesn't have an ending. It lingers. And so does she. Because some staged deaths are so convincing, they become real. The staged death of Stacy Feldman remains one of the most chilling and mysterious stories never officially solved. On the surface, it looked like a tragic accident, a shoe by the riverbank, a scarf tangled in the reeds, a missing mother who vanished without a trace. But behind the curtain was a carefully orchestrated plan by a woman determined to control her narrative, punish her husband, and reclaim her identity. Whether Stacy survived to start a new life or surrendered herself to the darkness of the river, her story stands as a haunting reminder. Sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell about ourselves. And sometimes, a staged death becomes more real than the life left behind. Disclaimer. This story is a narrative retelling inspired by real events. It is intended for mature audiences and should not be taken as legal evidence or factual testimony. Names, details, and perspectives have been adapted for storytelling purposes. Viewer discretion is advised. Subscribe now for more shocking true crime stories, mysterious disappearances, and untold secrets. Don't miss the next twist. Turn on notifications today.